The first letter was found by accident. Eleanor Hart had not planned to open the attic that night. It was nearly midnight, and the house was groaning in the wind, the kind of wind that sounds too human. She'd been reading by the fire downstairs when she heard a faint thump above her, soft, deliberate, like a heel pressing into old floorboards. She froze. The house was supposed to be empty. The thump came again. Eleanor grabbed the old lantern hanging by the door. Its light flickered to life, trembling as if reluctant to help. She climbed the attic stairs slowly, her breath fogging in the chill. At the top, the door was already ajar, though she swore she had closed it that morning. Inside, the air was heavy with dust and something else, something sour, old, and watching. And there, on a wooden trunk in the corner, lay a single yellowed envelope. Her name was written on it in perfect black ink, Miss Eleanor Hart. But the handwriting was hers. And she had never written it. Eleanor's pulse quickened. The attic felt smaller now, as if the slanted ceiling had inched closer. She reached for the envelope with trembling fingers. The paper crackled faintly, dry and thin like autumn leaves. For a moment, she thought she heard something. A soft hiss, a whisper that shifted when she tilted her head. She told herself it was the wind. It wasn't. The letter inside was written in the same looping script, unmistakably her own. The words were short, uneven, almost frantic. Don't go to the mirror tonight. It's not you in there anymore. She dropped the page. The lantern sputtered. The whisper came again, clearer now, sliding around her like smoke. You shouldn't have opened it. Her breath caught in her throat. The light died completely, plunging her into blackness. She could hear the paper shifting on the floorboards, though she wasn't touching it anymore. Something brushed her ankle.
Cold. Damp.
Curious. Eleanor turned, scrambling for the stairs, only to realize the door to the attic was no longer open. It had closed itself, and from behind her, in the darkness, came a slow, deliberate scrape. As if something else in that attic had begun to stand up, Eleanor pressed her back to the attic door, fumbling for the handle. It didn't move. It wasn't locked, it was simply holding still, as though someone were gripping it tightly from the other side. Her lantern lay toppled in the dust, a dull orange glow still pulsing weakly from its ember. In that faint light, she saw the corner of the letter twitch, and then drag itself an inch closer to her boot. Stop, she whispered, though she didn't know if she meant the letter or her own trembling. The whispering began again, softer, but now in a voice she recognized. Her own. Eleanor, it breathed. You left me up here. Her eyes darted toward the far end of the attic, where the shape of a broken mirror leaned against the wall. The cracked glass caught the lantern's light and fractured it into 7 trembling shards. In each shard, she saw herself, except one. The reflection in that piece was moving on its own, tilting its head slowly to one side, smiling. The whisper grew louder. You never sent the letters. You kept them. You buried them. But we remembered. And as she watched, the reflection's mouth opened wide, too wide, and from within the glass, a pale hand began to press forward through the crack. Eleanor's scream caught in her throat, frozen, strangled, useless. The mirror's surface rippled like water under moonlight, and that pale hand pushed further through the crack. Its fingers were too long, the nails blackened as though burnt. The air around it shimmered with the scent of mildew and something sweet, rotting flowers, maybe. She stumbled backward, bumping into the locked door. The hand groped the floorboards, searching blindly. Then another hand emerged. Both hands pressed against the mirror frame, and the reflection pulled itself out. The sound was wet.
Wrong.
Like silk tearing underwater. What came through wore her face, but not quite. The eyes were darker, hollow and gleaming, and its mouth moved just out of sync with hers. You left me, it said in a low, rattling version of her own voice. All those words you never sent, they stayed. They grew. Eleanor shook her head, whispering, No, those were just drafts, The double tilted its head, grinning. You wrote them to me. Then it opened its mouth again, impossibly wide, and from deep inside, paper began to spill out. Crumpled, Yellowed letters.
Dozens of them. Hundreds.
They fluttered around the attic like a storm of whispers, each one whispering a different version of her name. Eleanor fell to her knees, covering her ears. But the letters wouldn't stop. And one of them landed gently against her cheek, warm as skin, pulsing like a heartbeat. The letter on Eleanor's cheek throbbed, just once, before sliding down to her lap. It moved as though alive, the edges curling and uncurling like breath. Her lantern gave a feeble flicker, and for a heartbeat, she saw the ink seeping through the paper, dripping slowly, staining the floorboards in black veins. It wasn't ink anymore. It looked thicker, wet, almost alive. Eleanor tried to stand, but her knees wouldn't obey. Around her, the air shimmered with whispers, the sound of countless pages rustling in grief. "Read it," her double hissed from across the attic. "You never read this one." Against her will, Eleanor reached out. The letter's seal broke with a soft snap, and the bleeding words began to form before her eyes. "I hear you breathing in the walls. I feel you watching when I write. You said you'd wait for me, but you never left. You said you'd come back through the mirror." Her pulse slammed in her chest. The ink began to crawl up her fingers, winding into her skin like roots, spreading warmth. No, not warmth, heat. Eleanor screamed and flung the page away, but it clung to her hand, fusing, melting, becoming part of her palm. The words still moved beneath her skin, whispering her own handwriting in a rhythm that matched her heartbeat. Across the attic, her reflection laughed, low and breathless. "Now you remember." And from below, somewhere deep in the house, came a slow creaking sound. Like a door that had been closed for years was finally beginning to open. The creak echoed up through the floorboards, long, deliberate, and heavy. Eleanor froze, her blood thrumming like static beneath her skin. There shouldn't be a door down there. Not beneath the attic. Not beneath the house. She stumbled to her feet, shaking her hand violently, trying to rid herself of the letter that had become her skin. It pulsed once more, stubborn, the ink threads burrowing deeper. Every beat of her heart made the words inside her flesh shift, like something alive was reading her from the inside. The reflection was gone now. The mirror leaned silent and cracked, but its glass shimmered faintly, as though something still moved behind it. Then, the whisper came again, not from the attic this time, but from below. "Eleanor, come down." Her lantern's glow dimmed, a faint heartbeat of light guiding her down the narrow stairs. Each step creaked louder than the last. The whisper followed her, growing more solid, more human. Sometimes a woman's voice, sometimes not. When she reached the bottom of the stairs, the entire house felt wrong, tilted, humming with quiet expectation. The rug in the parlor was shifting, just slightly, the pattern swirling like water disturbed by breath. And there, beneath it, she saw the outline of a small, square door. Not built into the wall, into the floor. It was old wood, darker than the rest, slick with moisture. No handle, only a faint engraving burned into the center. "Return what you kept." Eleanor's mouth went dry. She reached toward it, and from behind the door came a knock.
Once. Twice.
Then a soft voice, muffled and wet. "You shouldn't have opened the first letter." The knock didn't stop. It came again 3 times now, slow, steady, like a heartbeat with purpose. Eleanor backed away until her spine pressed against the wall. The floor trembled faintly under her bare feet, as though something large was shifting just below. "Who's there?" she whispered, voice cracking. Silence. Then a reply, faint but too close. "You wrote to me first." Her breath caught. The voice was hers again. Only older, hoarser, tired. Eleanor stumbled forward, her trembling fingers brushing the edge of the trapdoor. The engraved words, "Return what you kept," seemed to sink into her skin as she touched them. The ink in her palm flared suddenly, the black letters writhing beneath her flesh. A drop of it, hot as blood, fell onto the wooden panel below. The wood absorbed it. The knock stopped. For one suspended moment, the house went utterly still. Then, from beneath the trapdoor came a long, slow dragging sound, like something pulling itself closer, nails scraping against wood. Eleanor's lantern flickered violently. The ink on her skin began to burn, the letters rearranging themselves into new words. "Let me out." Her heart slammed in her chest. She screamed, stumbling backward, as the trapdoor began to bulge upward, wood bending under invisible pressure, as though something beneath was pushing to get through. And then came the final knock. Not with a hand this time, with a face. A pale imprint pressed up against the wood from below, mouth open wide in a silent wail, the outline of the face pressed harder against the wood. Eleanor could see the grooves of its lips, the curve of its nose, the hollow sockets where eyes should have been. The wood splintered outward. A soft, crackling sigh, and a dark liquid began to leak from the seams, thick and glistening. It smelled of rainwater and dust and something faintly metallic, like ink left too long to rot. Eleanor staggered back, covering her mouth. The whispering began again. Dozens of voices this time, all overlapping, all hers. "You kept them. You promised to forget. You said you'd never open the door again." The face beneath the boards twisted, the mouth stretching wider until it became a dark, perfect circle. From it, ink began to pour, slow at first, then flooding, gushing through the cracks, coating the rug, the floor, her feet. Eleanor tried to run, but her soles stuck fast. The ink clung like tar. It crawled up her ankles, her calves, dragging her closer to the heaving trapdoor. Then the board snapped. A pale hand shot through, slick and trembling. Another followed, and between them rose a head, dripping black fluid, the same reflection that had crawled from the mirror, her double, only now half dissolved, its eyes hollow but smiling. "We waited where you buried us," it whispered, the sound bubbling from its throat. "All the words you never sent, they needed somewhere to live." Eleanor's body went rigid, because now she could see them. Dozens of faces, faint and shifting, forming inside the dark pool on the floor. Each one mouthing her words, her apologies, her letters. "We remember every word you never meant to say." The reflection leaned close, its smile splitting impossibly wide. "And now, it's your turn to listen." The floorboards groaned and opened. Eleanor fell through the ink-soaked boards, plunging into cold blackness that felt less like liquid and more like breathing. The moment she hit, it wasn't wet, it was soft, almost like paper. She gasped, choking on air that smelled of mildew and dust, and realized she wasn't falling anymore. She was sinking. Sheets of paper surrounded her, endless, fluttering, whispering as they brushed her skin. Every page bore her handwriting, letters she remembered starting, others she'd never seen before. Each one bled with moving ink, shifting words that rearranged themselves mid-sentence. "I never wanted to forget you. I never wanted to remember. You promised not to come back." The voices of the letters rose, overlapping in a rising tide of murmurs that sounded almost like chanting. Then she saw them, the outlines of figures in the dark. Dozens, maybe hundreds. People made entirely of paper, their faces half-written, half-erased. They turned toward her, their hollow eyes dripping ink. Each one held a letter close to its chest. Each one whispered a name, hers. Eleanor thrashed, trying to push upward, but the letters clung tighter. The paper figures reached for her hands, their fingers paper-cut sharp. "Write it down," one hissed. "Finish what you started." A thin trail of light appeared above her, the attic floor, impossibly far away. She reached toward it, her fingers barely brushing the edge of that faint, quivering glow. And then something grabbed her wrist from below. Not a paper hand, a real one. It was warm and trembling, and it whispered, in a human voice that sounded achingly familiar,
"Please,
don't leave me down here again." Eleanor froze. The hand around her wrist pulsed with frantic life, warm, human, desperate. But the fingers were slick with ink, and when she looked closer, she saw the faint lines of handwriting snaking along the skin. Names.
Dates.
Phrases she'd written in loneliness. "I miss you. I shouldn't have said that. Come back." The hand trembled, pulling gently, not to drag her down, but to keep her there. "Who are you?" Eleanor gasped, kicking against the tide of paper figures that rustled around her like dry leaves. The answer came as a soft sob. "You know me. You wrote to me every night until you stopped." The voice was fragile, almost broken, a man's voice. Familiar.
Tom.
She felt the name bloom unbidden in her mind, along with a flash of memory, a letter she'd written years ago, one she'd never sent. The one that had ended things. The one she'd buried in the attic trunk. The ink around them began to swirl violently, dragging the paper figures away into the dark. The hand squeezed hers harder, trying to pull her closer. "Tom," she whispered, "I didn't mean to." "You left me in words," the voice said. "You made me out of sentences, and then you stopped writing. You erased me." Eleanor tried to pull free, but the hand held fast. Beneath the ink, a shape began to form, his face, rising from the blackness, half made of letters, half flesh. His eyes glowed faintly, full of sorrow. "Finish the last letter," he whispered. "Let me go." The storm of paper around them howled, as if resisting. The words on Eleanor's skin burned bright, demanding alive. And above her, the light of the attic flickered, now dim, now gone, as the floor slowly closed. She had one choice left: write to him again, or join him where words never end. The ink-dark storm quieted. Every whisper, every page, every voice fell silent, waiting. Eleanor's feet touched something solid beneath the inky black. When she looked down, the paper had flattened into a smooth, endless surface. A desk had risen from it, her old writing desk, the one that used to sit by the attic window. The same crooked chair, the same chipped teacup. And there, in the center, lay a single clean sheet of paper and her fountain pen. Tom's face hovered across from her, half dissolved into the dark, his eyes pleading. "Finish it, Eleanor. Before they do." The paper figures had begun to move again at the edges of her sight, twitching, crawling closer, their own letters sloughing off their skin like snow. Eleanor sat down. Her hand shook as she picked up the pen, the nib trembling above the page. Ink dripped from her fingers, not from the pen, from her. The veins in her wrist pulsed black, feeding the pen's tip as though her blood and the ink were one. She began to write. "Tom, I should have sent this. I should have told you that I was afraid, not of you, but of what the words might become. I kept them because I thought silence would keep me safe." The paper hissed as the ink soaked in, alive, swirling with faint movement beneath the lines. Tom's voice softened. "You're almost there." But before she could finish, one of the paper figures reached her, its arms slapping onto the desk, its body convulsing. Words peeled off it in strips, twisting through the air like ribbons. Eleanor gasped. The words formed a shape, a face, her reflection's face. "You can't send it," it snarled. "You send it, you end it. And we end you." The desk shook. The paper curled at the corners, trying to tear itself apart. Tom reached for her, eyes wide. "Write my name, Eleanor. Write it now." The figure screamed as she pressed the pen down, her voice breaking. "Tom." And the moment the name hit the page, the entire black world shuddered. The instant Eleanor finished writing his name, the ink bled outward from the page, alive, furious. It hissed, twisting into shapes that clawed at the edges of the paper, struggling not to vanish. Tom's voice filled the air, layered with a dozen echoes of itself. "Keep writing. Don't stop now." But the paper figures screamed in protest. They dissolved into ink and smoke, their words peeling off in strips that tore through the air like ash in the wind. The ground of letters beneath Eleanor's feet began to melt, pages curling into flame, without heat. Every unspoken word she had ever written, every unsent confession, every angry line, every apology, was coming undone. The ink that had wrapped around her arm recoiled violently, slithering back into the paper. Her skin, once branded with black veins, was clean again, though it trembled with pain, like something that had been burned away. Eleanor looked up. Tom's face was flickering now, blurring at the edges, fading like an old photograph left too long in the sun. "You're freeing me," he whispered. "You're freeing us." The paper storm roared, a final chorus of every letter she had never sent, wailing as they were erased. Eleanor's pen slipped from her hand. It clattered against the desk, splitting in two. A final splash of ink spattered across her cheek, hot and wet, before evaporating into nothing. The desk, the paper, the dark world, all began to collapse inward, folding like pages closing in a book. Tom reached for her one last time, his fingers brushing hers, his voice fading to a breath. "Don't stop writing, Ellie, just write different words." And then he was gone. Only silence remained. And then, a single knock echoed from above. One, slow, deliberate. The attic door. The sound reverberated through the darkness, one hollow knock that seemed to shake the air itself. Eleanor blinked and found herself standing on the attic floor once more. The boards were dry, the lantern steady, the air thin and cold. No ink, no letters, no Tom. Only the quiet hum of a house pretending nothing had happened. For a fragile heartbeat, she thought she'd dreamt it all. Then the second knock came. It echoed from the other side of the attic door. Slow, measured. Not like a visitor's tap, but like someone rapping from inside the wood. Eleanor approached carefully, her hand hovering above the knob. "Tom," she whispered. Silence. Then 3 words, low and deliberate, spoken through the grain of the door. "You forgot one." Her stomach dropped. She turned toward the old trunk in the corner, the one where she'd found the first letter. The lid was slightly open again, just enough for the faint edge of yellowed paper to peek through. Her lantern flickered once. She knelt. The air around the trunk was cold enough to sting her fingers. The letter inside was sealed in black wax, unlike the others. No address. Just one line written across the front. "To the one who remembers." Her reflection glimmered faintly on the brass latch. For an instant, she saw something behind her in it. Another face, pale and waiting. The third knock came, louder now, shaking dust from the rafters. Eleanor held her breath, the sealed letter trembling in her hand. She could feel something beating inside it. Heartbeat. Or knocking. Or both. And beneath it all, a whisper she almost recognized, her own voice again. Only softer, sadder. "You shouldn't have written his name." The attic's lantern light dimmed to a faint pulse, beating in time with the letter in Eleanor's hand. Each throb made the wax seal quiver, as if something inside was breathing. She backed away, her heels scraping the dusty floorboards. "No," she whispered. "I finished it. I let him go. It's done." But the attic seemed to disagree. The boards under her feet began to tremble with a steady rhythm. Thud, 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 thud. The same cadence as that heartbeat in the envelope. Her name began to whisper again from the shadows. Hundreds of her own voices, soft and echoing, like paper scraping against paper. "You forgot one. The last one. The one you never dared write." The wax seal cracked. Just slightly. A hairline fracture along the edge. A chill swept the room, and Eleanor saw her breath fog the air in front of her. She tried to drop the letter, but her fingers wouldn't open. The paper clung to her like skin, the ink beneath the wax pulsing. She staggered to the mirror, the cracked one still leaning in the corner. Its glass was darker now, almost reflective ink instead of silver. Her reflection smiled faintly. "It's not over, Eleanor," it said, voice muffled, distorted, familiar. "You wrote him free, but someone had to take his place." Eleanor shook her head violently. No, I didn't mean to." The letter in her hand burst open. Ink sprayed outward in a spiral, wrapping around her wrist like a living ribbon. It dragged her closer to the mirror. The crack widened, humming with a low, sickening tone. From within the glass, her reflection reached out again. Its hand was no longer pale, it was made of paper. Torn, creased, bleeding words. "You never send the final letter," it whispered. "You become it." The ink ribbon tightened, yanking Eleanor toward the mirror's dark mouth. And just before she crossed the threshold, she heard the sound again.
Not knocking this time.
Writing. Someone, something, was scribbling her name from the other side. Eleanor hit the mirror like a breath swallowed by darkness. There was no crash of glass, only the sensation of falling into ink. The attic vanished. The air grew thick, and the world became an ocean of black paper, fluttering pages suspended in nothing, each one whispering in her own voice. Eleanor Hart. Eleanor Hart. Remember. She tried to scream, but her voice came out as scratching, like a pen dragged across parchment. Words poured from her throat, not sound, not air, sentences. Her own sentences. Letters she'd written, half-formed, unfinished. Each one turned into a strip of paper and joined the storm swirling around her. And in the distance, she saw it. A desk, lit by a single trembling light. Someone sat there, writing. The figure's hair was familiar. The posture, the trembling hand, the smudge of ink on the wrist. It was her. The other Eleanor didn't look up. She simply kept writing, over and over, her hand moving faster than humanly possible. Every word she wrote appeared on the endless pages around them, filling the void. Eleanor tried to reach her. Stop. You'll trap us here. The other her finally paused.
Turned.
Smiled. Someone has to keep the letters going. The ink surged upward, swallowing everything. And in the real attic, quiet now, calm, the old mirror stood whole again. The trunk was gone. The papers were gone. Only one thing remained on the attic floor. A single, sealed envelope, fresh and white, written across the front, in new, wet ink. To the one who opens the story next. The house waited. And somewhere inside, a faint scratching began anew. A pen against paper, writing the next name.